So if you just installed a 1-inch body lift on your Bronco and now your steering shaft is too short, this video's for you. So apparently I am in the top 1 percentile of people who install a 1-inch body lift and then their steering shaft is too short. You would think that the steering shaft would have a little bit more play than just installing a 1-inch body lift, but that's what I did. I installed a 1-inch body lift. If you haven't checked out that video, ding. So when I installed the 1-inch body lift, I pulled the rag joint apart just so that it would have enough play just in case it was too short. Well, in fact, it was. So what I did was, I took out the bracket that held the steering shaft in place in the firewall and took all that stuff out, but still I had too much of a gap. It was like almost an inch gap that I had, and so I really didn't feel comfortable driving it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna install an adjustable lower steering shaft. It's a fantastic piece of machinery. Click the more info button below to get yourself one if you're having this same problem, or if you just want a little bit more play in your steering shaft. What I did first was I actually removed my master cylinder and brake booster just so I had a little bit more room, removed my brake lines and covered up my disc brake proportioning valve just so nothing fell in there. Well, the first thing that you want to do is you want to remove your old lower shaft. Then remove the steering shaft coupler on the upper shaft by cutting into it on both sides. But just be careful not to go too deep with this because you need your splines intact for the new shaft. Then I used a chisel, or you can use a flathead screwdriver to knock the coupler off. Then sand down the edge of the steering shaft and round it out. This was a little trial and error to get it to the right angle to allow the new steering shaft to slide on. Then slide the new yoke on the upper steering shaft, and using the pre-drilled holes as your guide, drill a 5/16 hole through the shaft. Dude, this was the hardest part of this whole thing to do, and it took forever. If I did it again, I don't know that I would have kept the new yoke on there the whole time because the drilling made the hole on the new yoke bigger. But having it there ensured that my bolt would go in through the hole when I was done. So when I was doing this, I actually took the yoke off the new steering shaft. So if you did that at this point, put the yoke back on, which is actually pretty difficult. It's a good snug fit. Who doesn't like saying yoke? Being from the South, I kind of want to say yolk, but that's not right because it's like Y-O-K-E. It's not Y-O-L-K, but it reminds me of egg yolks. Those are delicious. And bowls. Bulls have yolks, don't they? Bull yoke. Then what you want to do is slide the new yoke back on to the upper steering shaft. And when I say slide, I mean imagine a slip and slide, but replace the slip and slide with rocks and try to slide down it. That's like what this is. There is no sliding on of the yoke. So get your hammer out, get your crowbar out, and bang this thing back into place. Then put the bolt back in and lock it down with some good Loctite. Then tighten that down with the provided set screw and nut. All right, so I just realized that I've done something pretty dumb. When I was putting the new lower steering shaft back on, I didn't realize that the bearing for the upper steering shaft had slid out, and so now after all that work I need to take the lower steering shaft back off, put this bearing back on, and put it all back together. Then get the other side onto the steering box and set it with that set screw nut. Now, again, there's no sliding this thing on, so like you really do have to use force to do it. But a word of caution, learn from my mistakes. I used a crowbar and a hammer, and apparently I damaged my front seal of my power steering box, because I came in the next morning and there's this pool of power steering fluid in the front of my Bronco. So make sure not to use too much force. You can use too much force, especially with these guns. Then pour yourself a drink because you are done. Now what I ended up doing was adjusting my steering wheel. The great part about the early Bronco steering wheel is, man, you can just adjust it tooth by tooth on that spline on the upper steering shaft. So if you realize that you did some stuff wrong and your steering was way off, go for your steering wheel. It makes it a little bit easier to adjust things to get it all straight. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Bulls, you know, the thing that goes on the neck of a bull when it's pulling things. Yokes. Yoke time. It's yoke time. Those are funny yokes. You've got yokes, John. All right, seriously.